Hi guys, today we are going to talk more about conflict and what to do in the midst of conflict, especially when things are getting really heated. So the other day I was telling a story about when the first time I went to the mountains and I was hiking. Now, what you guys don't know about me is one of my biggest fears is snakes. And as we were hiking, of course, we ran into some snakes. And so as I was telling the story, it really made me think about how to handle conflict and the little interaction that me and these two little snakes had. But at the moment, they were huge. Um, so anyways, what I was thinking about is in the midst of conflict, when we are fighting, sometimes if we are in the midst of a fight that's becoming very volatile, what we normally do is we defend and attack one another. And it's this back and forth of attack, defend, and it really gets us in a bind, and we typically very quickly go into fight or flight, where we're not really listening to one another, we're just trying to get back at the other person. And attack as we defend. And instead of listening, engaging, trying to create understanding, identifying what we need as opposed to just trying to persuade our partner to take our position. What I want to talk about are what are some ways when we get in the midst of conflict that we stop, we breathe, and we kind of take a step back and we think about what we're really trying to say to our partner, to very clearly state our needs or our position or just our perspective or point of view. So how does this all relate to camping and me seeing snakes the first time I ever went hiking? So here's the story, and then I'll relate it back to conflict. The story is this. As I was hiking, I have two boys who, love nature and are very active, and of course they like snakes, which is all fine. Anyways, so we were hiking and they were running off, and literally there was like a mountain on one side, the up part of the mountain, and then basically you can jump down. Actually, you wouldn't jump down because that would be dangerous. But as we were walking, I heard like a little rustling, and being from Florida, I assumed that it was just two little lizards, but we weren't in Florida, and so I was stepping forward, and as soon as I stepped forward, I heard that noise. I looked down, and there were two, in my mind, the biggest snakes in the world that I was about to step on. And of course, I went right into panic mode. I went into fight or flight, and this snake must have sensed my fear or was afraid of being stepped on, and he coiled up real quick and was getting ready to defend himself or herself. And so the only thing I could do in the midst of trying not to totally panic and jump off the side of the mountain, I had to take a step back, and in my mind I was trying to calm myself down to say, is it a poisonous snake, and what do I do? And of course I screamed, but I was stepping back, and I had to step back and tell myself to take a deep breath and just to identify, is this a poisonous snake or is it just a non-poisonous and I have nothing to be afraid of. And as I stepped back and stepped back even more, the snake uncoiled and slithered off, and his little friend slithered off with them because there were two. And so, I survived, obviously. And by the way, they were non-poisonous snakes. And they weren't big. They were probably only like this big. But of course, in my mind, they were gigantuous. And my boys thought it was cool, and at the end we were all laughing and went on and enjoyed the rest of our vacation. So to make a long story short, it really, as I was retelling the story the other day, it really got me thinking about how those are some steps we take in the midst of conflict. Now you might be asking, how does this relate to conflict at all? Monica, you were in nature and it was between you and a snake, or two snakes. And what I'll say is this, when I was triggered, when I felt afraid, when I felt like I had to defend myself, I quickly went into fight or flight. And, I don't know what a snake was thinking, but I know for me, it felt afraid too, and it went to defend himself because I literally did almost stand right on top of it. And so how does this relate to conflict? When we're in fight or flight, when we're with our partner and we're engaging in a disagreement, what do? We start to defend ourselves. And I'm not saying that's the best way, but that's how we very quickly go into that fight or flight or attack defend model, where we're just like attacking or we're defending ourselves, and it becomes very ugly very quickly. Or and we also jump into fight or flight. And just as a refresher, flight or flight is when we, in conflict, we lose peripheral vision, so we have tunnel vision, we lose the ability to hear, and we lose the ability to empathize or compromise. So once we are in fight or flight, we are just attack, or defend. And as you guys can see, if we have tunnel vision in the midst of fight, we're not paying attention. We're typically saying things that we don't mean, or we're saying hurtful things. So really, as it relates back to my little incident with the snake, it made me think about if we stop and we take a step back and we start to breathe and assess the situation, which is really, what I did. Was it poisonous or not poisonous? I mean, to me, it didn't really matter, but poisonous kind of takes it up a whole nother level. And that's kind of like a relationship too. If we step towards a fight, we are saying things that are very hurtful, very venomous. And, they're not, sometimes we say things that are really hard to come back from. So in the midst of this little interaction while I was hiking, it really, if we do some of these things that are very similar with another person in the midst of conflict, we're actually repairing, or we're able to stay in a heated discussion without it becoming hurtful and harmful to the relationship. So once we start a heated discussion, or once we start a conflict, stop and take a deep breath. Don't jump over the side of the mountain, obviously. Start thinking about, okay, is this, what do I need to stay safe here? Or what do I need to stay in this without, it escalating any farther? Obviously I didn't want to get attacked by a snake or bit by a snake. And just like in conflict, I don't want to be attacked by my partner, and so I have to take responsibility for my part in this. I can't just ignore that there's a snake coiled up, afraid, just like I can't ignore my partner who might have hurt feelings or who might feel very passionate about something. And I feel very passionate, and so how do we come to a compromise, or how do we get our point across without hurting the other person or putting the other person down? So again, to go over the steps, initially, when we first start down that path of a disagreement, stop and take a deep breath. I've said in my previous videos, respond as opposed to react. Response is really thinking clearly about what I want to say. Use I statements. I feel, I need. Let's start over. This is going down the wrong path. I really think that we should agree to disagree here. Saying things like that help kind of stay in it. Or, if you're saying, I think we need to agree to disagree, or I need to take a quick break to kind of calm down and cool down, those are the things that you're doing to help the relationship instead of hurt the relationship. In the midst of conflict, we're often trying to persuade our partner to take our side, and our subjective reality is our subjective reality, which means it's just how we see it. So instead of just jumping right into persuasion, first we need to, cool down or calm down. If I'm in fight or flight, I'm not going to say things clearly, and I'm just going to take my position of I'm right, or no, it's going to be this way, as opposed to having a good engagement between me and my partner. I do want to communicate how I see it. That is important to me. And it's also important to my partner for, him to really say, hey, this is how I see it. So oftentimes, instead of just jumping into, no, it was this way, no, it was this way, it's, this is how I feel, this is how I see it, this is what I need, this is, something really important to me that I'd like you to sit and just understand, and then I want to sit and understand your position. Saying things like that really help us, again, de-escalate any attack of defend, and really throw that out the door and just communicate in a clear manner. Now, sometimes in the heat of the moment, guys, I know it's super hard. You don't want to stay in it. You just, you're so in this place of wanting to defend. If it's really gotten to that point where you feel like you're in fight or flight, or all you want to do is defend, stop and take a break. Taking a break is actually something really healthy, even if it's for 15 minutes. When your heart rate is booming and you're in fight or flight, really the best thing to do is to stop and take a break. So, the thing about the break, it doesn't mean that you're not going to come back and talk about it. It's a commitment that you make to one another. I need a break for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and I'll come back and we can address this at the time. And in the midst of the break, you are cooling down and cooling off, and you're also thinking about what is one thing that I want to communicate to my partner that's really important to me about this particular issue. So let's say you're fighting about who's taking out the trash, and you had this agreement that, you would take out the trash 3 days a week, or that your partner would take out the trash 3 days a week, and that's not happening. So usually what couples do is they get in this huge fight about who's taking out the trash. And really, so what I would want you to do is, instead of fighting about who's doing it and how upset you are that the other person isn't doing it, is saying, I need us to either come back and renegotiating who's doing what at the house, because this isn't working for me. And that way you're not criticizing, you're not defending, you're not attacking, you're saying what you need in a way that's not in the heat of the moment, the trash is full again, and why aren't you taking out the trash? It's, hey, I need us to sit down and really renegotiate who's doing what here, because this doesn't seem to be working for us. It's a very different shift that, again, instead of creating conflict, it helps us kind of state what we need very clearly. Hopefully it helps you guys come to a compromise and then go on with your day. Now, I know fights are not always just about the trash. They're about other things, and we'll address those in other videos about who does what, negotiating conflict. However, in this video is about what to do in the midst of conflict. Instead of jumping into attack, defend, or in my situation with the snake, instead of jumping off the side of the mountain, I stopped, I took a deep breath, I stepped back, and I assessed the situation. What do I need here to stay safe? And I think that's really important in conflict. What do I need to stay safe? Switch that a little bit. What do I need not only to stay safe, but to stay in this so I can clearly communicate what I need, or my point of view, and also so I can clearly hear what my partner is trying to say. Understanding is one of the key components in a relationship that really makes a relationship work. So if I'm committed to making, this relationship work, if I'm committed to creating understanding, even in the midst of conflict, I'm committed to this relationship. So just to repeat one more time, in the midst of conflict, stop, take a deep breath, respond. What do I need? What do I want? What's my perspective? What do I want compromise to look like? And how can I create a place where I'm also willing to hear what my partner is wanting to say? Because that creates understanding, connection, and it's a commitment to one another to really stay in a conversation instead of jumping into attack, defend, where I'm tearing us apart or where he might be tearing us apart. I think in some little tidbits that I said in there, if you're in fight or flight, take a break. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, up to an hour to de-escalate, to get that heart rate back down so you can hear what your partner is saying, so you can also clearly communicate what's important to you. Remember, in fight or flight, we lose hearing, we lose our peripheral vision, and we don't want to empathize or compromise. None of those things are good for a conversation or even conflict. In a conflict, we want to be able to empathize and validate. Having empathy or validating doesn't mean that you agree with, it's saying I'm here in this with you. I want to understand where you're coming from. Super important. And also, we want to be able to hear what our partner is saying. And, if we're in fight or flight, if we're in like that attack defend mode, we're not listening, we're just wanting to react, and we're going to impulsively say things that we don't mean. So, when I stop, when I take a deep breath, when I take a break, I'm able to cool myself off so I can come back to the conversation, clearly identifying what I'd like compromise to look like, what's important to me, and how we get to an agreement. So I hope that these things are helpful and that you enjoyed my story about my first time hiking and seeing snakes. But really, hopefully this helps you kind of take a minute to say, in the midst of conflict or when I feel afraid, stop, take a deep breath, step back, either metaphorically or literally, and think about what I want to say or how I want to respond or how to stay in this heated discussion without it escalating into attack, defend, or saying things that are hurtful to one another. Have a great day.